Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and since 2010, I have interviewed hundreds upon hundreds of songwriters about the writing process. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So I've always been interested in treating songwriters the same way that we treat poets and traditional prose writers, as writers, plain and simple. There is no talk of how bands get their name, favorite tour stories, favorite foods, band drama, or anything else. This is an intelligent conversation about the writing process between two writers as we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process. That's it, nothing else. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the podcast, it's John Gourley from Portugal the Man. Portugal the Man has a new EP out called Ulu Selects Volume 2. I hope I pronounced Ulu correctly. You never know because you see these things written all the time. You just don't hear them pronounced. Portugal the Man won a 2017 Grammy for their song Feel It Still. The category was Best Pop Duo Group Performance. If you don't think you've heard Feel It Still, you absolutely have heard it before. This was really, I enjoyed this discussion. It's one of my favorites I've had in a while, because having been in my previous life, I was a special education teacher, public school teacher, taught kids with learning disabilities, and a lot of those kids had severe ADHD. And then we spent a lot of this podcast talking about Gourley's ADHD and the impact that has on his songwriting process. And he said, he's always chasing that ADHD thing. Wherever it tells you to do, whatever it tells you to do, just do it. And I mentioned this during the interview at some point, that the mistake people make is that they think that people with ADHD don't focus on anything, when in fact they're focusing on everything. And isn't that a big difference? And he really uses that ADHD part of his personality as an asset to his creative process. And we did discuss also the impact that exercise has on ADHD and on creativity, and how he talked about having a treadmill in the studio and the benefit that has for him. But a lot of this is really about harnessing that. How do you harness that? How do you harness the fact that you're kind of focusing on everything and chasing everything? And it doesn't sound like Gourley's willing to ever say, yeah, I'm not going to go down that route. He's going down every route, wherever that takes him, and chasing it till the end. We spent a lot of time on that today, and I found that to be fascinating. Again, as someone like me, who used to work with kids like that, this was just a fascinating look into that, on that impact on his creative process. Also, I have to mention this. He talks about, so we talked about pen and paper. And at the beginning of the discussion, he said he's not specific about what type of pen, what type of paper. But then, as you'll hear, he goes down the deepest rabbit hole ever on the type of pen and the type of, and the color of ink and the brand and all that kind of stuff, which I thought was hilarious. So anyway, I loved this discussion with John Gourley of Portugal the Man. Enjoy. As a songwriter, is it important to create every day, no matter how bad it is, or do you feel like doing that might lead to things that are too derivative?
Damn, I don't do it. I I'm I don't know. My process is like, if something hits me, like I'll like make like a voice memo, like a voice note, or like little recording. Um, I'm like crazy ADHD, and I have this weird thing in me with that, like, uh despise for like authority or whatever it is. If I don't know what's gonna happen with it, I have anxiety. So I kind of have to go in and be like, it just create, it's going to come out. Like, I'm going to do something with it. I kind of have to like capture momentum. That being said, literally, like Danger Mouse, from Danger Mouse to Mark Ronson, Jeff Basker, everybody I've ever worked with is like, do it every day. Like, exercise that muscle. My way of doing it is, when we started out anyway, was I'm going to record an album a year. I'm going to gather all these experiences, and I'm going to go in and just write from the top of my head. And that's the way a lot of our early stuff worked. Is I would sit down, I would just play guitar through what felt like what I wanted to do. If I hit a wall, I'd be like, cool, I'm going to change something. If I got bored, I'm going to change something. Um, yeah, it's not something that I do every day, but a lot of things inspire it. So a lot of things that I do inspire my songwriting, which would be like I draw and I paint and I like design. I like making clothes. And when I make those things, I do think about like what does the musician look like or sound like that wears this? Like what is this thing I'm drawing? Like how does that relate to like album artwork? Like oh like how does that artwork contrast the music? I mean I think about a lot of those things. I think a lot of it is comes from like watching skate films growing up and hearing like I mean dude like there was a movie called Secondhand Smoke growing up, not just get off the subject, but Secondhand Smoke was like Rodney Mullen is skating to Dream On and Jeremy Ray is skating to White Room. And he- seeing people skate from this like punk scene and having this to- our parents' music, not cool, behind it, it was like this really inspiring, like, I guess my parents' music is cool. I guess that's exciting. So I tend to think about like aesthetics as I'm writing. So I that's kind of a big part of my songwriting process, which is I don't know if that's weird, but that's the way I look at it.
It's not. So I have a couple of follow-ups. One, so if I'm hearing you correctly, how often are you sitting down then and saying, "Oh, there's a song that like something's coming to me," rather than I have no idea where this is going and I'm going to see where this takes me. So if I heard you correctly, you're more along the lines of I have an urge to write because there's an idea I have. Like you're not comfortable with saying I'm just going to start to write and who knows what'll happen. Like which side do you fall in that?
Oh, I'm definitely the latter. I guess I sit down and I see where it takes me. Like that's the type of writer I am. I like to sit down and see where it takes me. That is a collection of these like inspired go like this is the idea and then they become a part of this like pool. And I tend to utilize that pool of ideas throughout the entire process. If I'm making an album, I'll have a line that I'm like, okay, this is the idea of the album. On Evil Friends, I use it twice on our record, on our album Evil Friends. And it's on the song Evil Friends and Creep in a T-shirt. It's the chorus of Evil Friends and the bridge of Creep in a T-shirt. I just had used the same line in the same space. And I kind of build off of that idea. So everything will kind of come from this like I'll have a line in the chorus. It'll be like me trying to take progress that idea and grow it and take it somewhere new and like sing it counter melodies to that. And
So when you those do you have discarded ideas from years ago that you may go back to? I've heard songwriters tell me like they're digging up things from 20 years ago. Whether they're lines or melodies that didn't have a place then, but how often how far back do you go for those ideas?
I mean, I'll give you like our biggest example is Feel It Still I had for 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, I had that bass line. I had the chorus. I actually had a really famous producer tell me that I wouldn't do that to Marvel like with the Marvelettes melody. And it literally like went through I mean multiple producers. I think that's one thing as a songwriter. Like I knew there was something in this, and that's why I carried it as long as I did. But you do have to find that moment where inspiration hits. I mean, it wasn't that song before it was that song. So I tend to go back to those ideas Like I'll have them for it. Yeah, it kind of depends with me. Like I have this big bank of. I mean, I've been doing it 20 years, so we probably do go back 20 years, which is very crazy to think. Um, yeah, I'll like mine that stuff, but typically it's like I'll do something new and like just apply it. Like, okay, I like that little melody, and I'll throw it in.
When it comes to the lines, are you drawing from certain types of other art, whether it's movies or maybe see hear someone say something? I mean, I've heard billboards, like there are certain things that people do, certain sources that people tend to draw from more often. Does that happen with you?
Yeah, are you talking about like, do I see like somebody sees a billboard and they're like, oh, that's a good line,
Yeah.
like that? Yeah, one thing that I do when I'm writing, I mean, I think it's very much along the lines of the Bowie like words in a hat thing. I kind of just I pick up a book and I flip through it and like wait for something to like, oh, this makes me think of this like combination of words. Um, it's essentially that though. You're essentially like opening it up and whatever hits me, what hits me is going to be different than what hits you. You know, it could be a book of poetry and you're flipping through it and you're like, well, I'm not thinking about leaves, I'm thinking about the sky or whatever it is. And but that will stand out to me. And I'm kind of a big believer in letting your brain kind of go to sleep and like see what hits. And I find it fascinating when other people do it and they pick totally different things than you would.
So the one standard quote that I always give songwriters, just because I think it's a fascinating topic to me, and I think you're kind of alluding to this, and that is Agatha Christie, the writer, said the best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes. So that idea that which is why we get our best ideas in the shower. There's scientists have talked about why when our brains are engaged in activities that require no conscious thought. So it could be vacuuming, gardening, mowing the lawn, folding laundry. The eureka moments happen when we're not thinking about them. And I know that's certainly the case to me, but the problem is that if I intentionally go mow the lawn, it's not going to happen, right? You have to, you can't say like, I'm going to go mow the lawn. It's got to be something where you're not thinking about it at all. I find that whole thing fascinating. Writers talk about it all the time. So how often does it happen with you where those ideas are coming to you when you're not thinking about them, but you're doing something that's monotonous?
Yeah. So yeah, it's the the anxiety you create when you go out to do the thing that's gonna like clear your brain so you clear your head so you can actually write. Um yeah, that's it's I gotta say it's the most annoying thing about having any success in writing. It's like really easy when you're like there's no goal in mind. I mean, there's no like I'm not gonna be rich and famous. Like I'm not gonna have any of those things. I don't even care for those things. You go out and do that, and then the second there's people in the room asking you to like, where's the lyrics? Well, we're just waiting on our asshole singer for the lyrics, which you're always waiting on. He's an asshole. Like they're an asshole. Like they always are. But it's so difficult to write when I don't. John Cleese has some really great talks on creativity. I don't know if you've ever seen him talk about it. Like,
I haven't,
yeah,
but I'm a huge John Cleese fan. So what did he say?
he talks about that. Like, it's essentially the same thing you're saying. Like, it's why I go and I take a long shower. You know, like I know that something's gonna hit me, and I don't try to think about it. Like, I just go in there. Like, that's part of my like daily routine. That is not a writing thing. You know, I try and allow myself space to be free of those ideas. I will say like um God, I have one reference because we have one song where people know it, and it's but it's the perfect example of I wasn't trying to write that song. Like our most successful song by far, I did not try to write. The bridge is a George Carlin quote, fighting a war for peace is like fucking for virginity. And it's it was because I was so annoyed with the process that was happening. Everybody's like intellectualizing this. It's got to be this kind of mix, and it's got to be this kind of structure on one of the songs we were working on. And I stepped into this to a side room to just play a bass line and not think about it. And I just happened to have another artist in the room who's doing the exact same thing and said, "Yo, can I record that? I'm not trying to do it. I'm not trying to write right now. Yeah, I can do that. Do you have a bridge? Well, it's just a variation on the chord progression. Yep, here you go. Like here's a different thing. Do you have a chorus? Well, I have this thing that I've had forever. I'll do it as a placeholder. There's no like attempting to write that. I think there's a healthy balance for me personally in knowing what it is when it happens, because you kind of have to know what it is, in my opinion. Like you don't want to think about it as it's happening. But as soon as it did happen, I will say that everything gets thrown at me. Like I don't think this should be a democratic process. I hope this isn't like controversial for like bands. It should not be. And I think it's really silly when we do that because there's somebody driving that vision. And it's not to be dismissive. Like all of those parts are so incredibly important to arrangement and the way this stuff comes together. A lot of what I'm writing might be inspired by something the bass player said, or a suggestion that kind of like flew by, and you're like, I heard that, but I'm not listening to that. So I think it's somewhere in the middle of like being free and also recognizing like what it is, you know?
So yeah, it's interesting. I love everything that you say, and I think the danger, what we're alluding to, is if you start thinking about it too much, you overthink it. I mean, I feel like I'm writing an essay right now, but I'll tell you this: spent about 90% of the time thinking about that essay and 10% actually writing it. Um, but I have all these ideas in my head, but I feel like I'm not, and I really should just sit down and write them, but they're good. But I do think though that I take some comfort in the fact that my process is always taking place, and but I think that when I start to think like those words that are in my mind, the frustrating thing to me is the words that are in my mind are not how they're going to look on the page. Like there's always that kind of, I have what's up here, but somehow those words travel down my fingertips and travel my arms and leave my fingertips. They don't look like they did up here, and I just have to get down and write that damn thing. But I that's my anxiety too, is overthinking it.
Yeah, it is for everybody. That's something that I see with like the first thing artists create. I think is just the most fun. Like that's the thing in like you think you might come up with the idea. Like I'm the first one. Like I did it. Um, and I think as you learn the process, it you you just always have to be progressing and like finding that new way to it. Yeah, I guess when I think about songwriters and I think about things that I enjoy personally, there's like different directions you can take, and where I'm at right now personally is following my own ADHD train of thought where I want to be off the fucking rails. I want to hear like things like throwing me off the scent and then finding it again. Like, oh, I found it.
I want to ask you about that because before I got my PhD, I was a public school teacher, taught kids with ADHD, severity ADHD.
I bet.
So I'm well versed. I mean, I taught actually those are the only kids in the class for me. That was actually what I was trained to
Specific.
do.
Wow.
Yes, yeah, specific. I was actually a special education teacher, taught kids. They were kids who who were one of they were almost all, these were severe ADHD, severe ADHD. So I want to ask you about that because I'd love to know how you harness that as a strength in your process rather than saying, um, oh, I have a hard time focusing, so I need to adjust. But it sounds to me like you're using that as a strength and you're playing to that. So I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, I I think a lot of it is honesty. I mean, I think that really is what we're all connecting with at the end of the day. That thing that is preventing you from writing is dishonest. You're trying to intellectualize it, you're thinking about it, that is dishonest to who you are. You're trying to like present something versus like let it happen. I think as somebody with ADHD, like allowing that intuition to like naturally be like that's my intuitive mode of like finding something is I bounce around between ideas. It's naturally leading me through the progression of ideas, which is an honest thing to listen to. Uh, it may seem like angular and like jagged and like fucked up and like like badly arranged from the outside, but I think when you look at these like full pieces, um, I think it becomes like honest to me. Just like a hardcore scene. When I look at the hardcore scene, those those are I picture ADHD kids anytime I think of the hardcore scene. Like they're kicking each other, jumping off the walls, and completely inspired and passionate about everything that's happening. But it needs to like change. Like it needs to be different. Like it and you see that like frantic, like manic energy there. And that's the thing that I personally try to harness in myself is this like that idea when I started out the band. Like I know that's what I want to hear. I know that's what I want to see. I want to see like what idea takes me to the next thing. I I I did that work and I spent those years in studios with Danger Mouse and Jeff Astor and John Hill. Mike D was the biggest influence on me is Mike D. Seeing the Beastie Boys studio. If you want to know something about the creative process and fucking writing, I walked into that studio and I saw trash instruments, dead frets, everything. Like
Uh,
my first pedal board. There's like it's Boss pedals, it's regular ass DS1, like distortion. Like that's what it is. Every single instrument you picked up sounded like the Beastie Boys, and it was trash.
uh,
Like, it was literal trash in some cases. Like the plastic mic that they used on those records. Talking to Mike, like I worked with him for 2 years. I'd say like, hey, I'm having trouble with these lyrics. So I'm writing around a Beastie Boy. We're at Rick's studio. We're at Shangri-La, and you're trying to write lyrics. Mike, I'm having trouble. Like, do you have any ideas? Yeah. What did you have for breakfast? And you're like, I'll stir fry you in my wok. Like, I like my sugar with coffee and cream. Like everything like came to me, and it's like, yeah, of course. You're not thinking about it. And like seeing that, like that's that ADHD thing to me entirely. Like that is infinitely inspiring. Seeing the BC Boys studio with multiple smash hits, uh, respected in almost every community, and they're punks. They they didn't think about any of that stuff. The whole thing was like intergalactic, like that's a cool vocoder thing. Like let's loop that. And I'm gonna rap on it about what I had for breakfast and the Star Trek I was watching. That's like honesty to me. And the amount of output was just like, we're gonna make an instrumental record this time. We're gonna like that's chasing that ADHD thing and just whatever it tells you to do, like just go and do that. I'm working on our new album right now, like post all of this like I think I wrote some of our best songs on our last record. They are like I think they're objectively our best songwriting that has happened. It's probably one of our worst performing albums, and it's to me in looking at that, it's this exercise in like I think you have to recognize that you're thinking about it too much. Like why are you thinking about this? Like fucking like destroy this shit. Like that's what we're here to do is like take take the last idea you heard, that the last inspiring thing you heard, and take it to that next place in whatever way you want. Like whatever package fits like whatever the thing inside you tells you to do with it.
One of the things I think
Yeah.
the misconception people say that people with ADHD don't focus on anything, but they're actually focusing on everything. That's always the mistake people make is kids with people with ADHD, they can't focus. It's like, no, 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 you've got it all wrong. They're focusing on everything. And it dawns on me that as a creative person, that could be a tremendous asset. Practically, are you able to sit for long stretches and write? I'm talking literally sit for a stretch and write, or do you feel like you've got to take frequent breaks because of that?
Yeah, well, I think another thing with ADHD is like hyper fixation, like hyper fixating on the thing. Like if I'm sitting down to edit something, if I find that moment, it's the best feeling in the world. And something to understand about it too is like I not being precious is another thing because I'm gonna find something else tomorrow. Like I'm gonna find something else in the next 30 minutes to think about and to do. So there's a thing that my ADHD does that really scratches that itch, which is like I find the thing, I find the thing, I find the thing, I find the thing, I finish the thing. There's like a nanosecond of the greatest feeling ever on earth, and then it's gone. And then you're you're doing the next thing and you want to make that. What's fun about utilizing it to me is when you're not talking about like traditional structure, which is not intuitive to me. I mean, some of it is like naturally like intuitive, obviously, but it's it's not really my thing is like bounce off the walls. What's next? It's scratching that itch like every 15 seconds. Like what is it? Like I want a bell. Like I want to like bongos. Like whatever it is, like bring it in and out. And I find that really fun and like I find it really exciting letting those like all of those ideas I've ever heard. Like it could be Quincy Jones, like, wow, that's like kind of like perfect arrangement. That's really fun. Like I like the way things play off of each other. I also like chaos, and being able to mix those worlds, like that's the reason I write. And I think it's reflective of the world as somebody with ADHD. Like imagine having a phone with ADHD. Like it's chaos, 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 chaos as you look at the phone and then you set it down and there's like this like breath and you get to think for a second and then you walk around and like do a million things and then chaos.
Let me ask a very practical question. When it comes to lyrics, are you a pen and paper person or a computer/phone person?
Pen and paper forever. Like
Nice. Let's talk because songwriters are very particular about brands of pens, colors of ink, types of paper. You laugh, but you have no idea
I
how
have no idea.
particular. Does that matter to you?
To me, like yeah, no, it does, of course. Like I use these I mean I'm not super, super specific. I like pens that like bleed a lot. So I like super inky, like gel pens. I'll use those. And then Micron 0.005 because they're
But I'm not,
super
but
delicate.
you're not, I'd like that you said, but you're not specific. And yet you can tell me the point.
Okay,
That's great.
okay, well that's what I like. I like that because it's super delicate. Like there's a thing about using that, and I'll tell you what. these fucking assholes in my band, they'll pick up my pen sometimes. They don't know. These are like, you do not press on these pens. There's something about having to write delicately to me that
Interesting.
that gives like a little bit more care to what you're putting down and a little bit more thought. Like it's just committing it, you know? But I'm also not one of those people because I'm ADHD. Do I have those lyric books? No. I don't know where they are. Like they don't exist anymore. And I know this is stuff people would want, but like yeah, they're like covered in drawings. They look really, really cool. They looked really, really cool. Let me rephrase that. They looked cool when I had them in my possession.
Does color of ink matter?
Um, I actually use like a lot of different colors. Um, so because like art ends up spilling onto these pages and distracting me from everything. So I will use colored pencils. There is like a it's either specific. I am super specific about this. I'm sorry. Um, I'm forgetting the brand name, but MoMA did this collaboration with um this colored pencil company. It starts with an I. Um, but I bought as many packs as I could because there were these like fluoro like colored pencils, and I have packs and packs of them just sitting like ready to be sharpened to nothing. I use those with just like colored gel pens and then the microns.
I had Jerry Harrison to the Talking Heads on, and he was a visual artist too. And he said he has to write with felt tip because the sensation of the scraping on the page.
Wow, I love that.
Um, so lined or unlined paper?
I like lined paper.
Oh,
I
do you?
actually, yeah, I actually prefer like drawing on lined paper, which is probably like the distraction from school.
Interesting. What about when you're erasing, or I guess, do you erase or do you? Okay, so there's many ways we can go. You could, if you do something you don't like, do you erase it so you never have to see it again? Do you draw a straight line through it so that you may go back to it, or do you just scribble furiously so that you never have to look at it?
uh, yeah, I think I'm a scribbler more than anything. Like I kind of like I'll black it out. I kind of like grabbing like again chisel tip sharpies. I'm sorry, I said I was not specific about things, but chisel tip sharpies only. I fucking hate touching those like normie sharpies. Has to be a chisel tip and just redacted.
I had Daniel Lanois, the producer, on a couple of years ago, and he said he writes everything on 11 by 22 unlined paper. And it's got to be 11 by 22. And there are thought bubbles, there are arrows, there's lyrics here, lyrics here. It's a complete mess.
Yeah, okay, so Lenoir, like we are very like kindred spirits in that the way my notes look. I mean, dude, I know I have one notebook around here that I could use an example and like scan something, but yeah, my the way my notes look, the way my lyrics look, uh, it might be a song for every like 10 pages because something will happen in the room and I'll go, Mac Miller wrote told a really funny joke about this, and like it'll be like it's my diary. It is just random thoughts coming out, knowing that I hate hate most of this. Most of this I find like really frustrating. But again, like I think it's all about like I idea dump. Like I am very, very like my happy place is word association. Like okay, what does that make me think of? It makes me think of this, makes me think of this, makes me think of this. Um, ADHD, I make lists. So you'll see like lists of things. And I love it when they make it into songs as it seems like a random throwaway, like within the lyrics, but this is all coming back to my ADHD being a driver of my process, which is it could be like a quote that I heard in a movie that's going to be written down. That George Carlin quote is going to be there. Um, I'm going to be working on this thing about my daughter over here. And then just like, oh, in case my little baby girl's in need, and then we're playing baseball. Am I coming out of left field? Always throw on these like little like lines. I think the most honest things to me are the lists, really. Like, what do I need to survive in the woods?
So I want to actually, it's a great segue into what I was going to ask you about next because I actually wrote an article. I do some freelance writing on the side for the Washington Post. I read about exercise, and these are science-based articles. And there's a tremendous um, connection between aerobic exercise and the immediate benefit it has on creativity on people with ADHD. So I wrote this actually during COVID because of all the kids with ADHD who were home and they were just suffering school wise because they could not get out. And so I wrote this article actually about kids, but the results happen. It transfers to adults too. So basically, there's a chemical in the brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor that gets secreted through increased blood flow, which is exercise. I can send you the article. I've written about this. It's fascinating stuff. And so what they did was they put people on a treadmill for 20 minutes at 60% max heart rate, which is not much more than moderate walk, and asked those people, and then gave those people a battery of tests afterwards and measure higher order thinking, like executive function. Those people always scored higher than people who didn't exercise. And it's all about the heart rate. And so they tested against people who weren't exercising, and it's got to be something that elevates the heart rate, but it just has to elevate it a little bit. And the benefit lasts about 90 minutes post exercise. So the point here is that when I was a special education teacher, the parents would bring the kids to us in the morning. They would say, I wore Johnny out for you, because they thought they were wearing Johnny out to exhaust him. But ironically, Johnny was coming to us more focused because he had just exercised. And so there are school systems now that are actually, instead of dropping the kids off in front of the school, they're dropping the kids off a half mile before school, and the kids have to walk the rest of the way. But the first period teachers are noticing dramatic improvements in performance. So, okay, that's a long way of saying I'd love to know what impact that you think that has on your creative process.
This is so fucking funny that you you are bringing this up. Okay, so when we were making our last record and the record before that and the record before that, I told our past management, I said I need a treadmill in the studio. That is some rock star shit. To be like, I need to buy a treadmill and put it in the studio. But I noticed that. Like I'm a runner, so like I'll go and run and I'll listen to music. And the thing is, those ideas will hit me while I'm out running, and then I'm gonna forget about it because I have ADHD. So like I will do my best to like kind of document it, but I had recognized that that was happening, and yeah, I feel like there should be treadmills in studios if there wasn't a problem with like humidity and like sweat and all that. Um,
Well, so here really quickly, so the parameters are the ideal is 30 minutes at 60% max heart rate, and it's not much more than a moderate walk. And I said the benefit lasts about 90 minutes post exercise. Now, anything is better than nothing, but the one caveat is that ideally it's an exercise that requires no executive function. So in other words, no thinking. So people who exercise in a natural environment, it was more effective than people who exercised in New York City because you're trying not to get hit by a bus. Um, they found that even treadmills were not as effective as stationary bikes because on a treadmill you're thinking about not ending up like a viral YouTube
yeah.
video. So it's fascinating stuff. And what they found was that also people who played Wii Fit, the benefit was wiped out because people are spending all of their time in Wii Fit thinking. The implications are fascinating for all sorts of people, but for people with ADHD, it's really one of the most effective ways to get people to focus, adults, kids, anything like that. But again, it needs to be something that requires, so if you're on a treadmill, that's better than nothing. Um, but this yeah, it sounds like that does work for you.
Yeah, so would like an Airdyne, like one of those bikes, work
Yes,
as well? But it's
yeah,
like both.
because you're not worried about falling off, right? With
Yeah.
treadmills, you are thinking about, so, if you're going to watch TV, if you're on a treadmill, it should be something that requires like bachelors and bachelorettes. Don't watch anything that's going to be very, you know, involve depth of thought. Apologies to reality TV people, but you know what I mean. Um, but
Yeah.
but but getting people to understand that you're not effective sitting for long stretches of time, but it was it the research is fascinating, and I'm a runner too. I ran track in college. I was a track coach for a while too. So this was my
Cool.
world, and I would come back from runs, and I was like, why do I want to feel like I want to write the second I get back in the door? And then I looked at, oh my God, there's all this body of research that was showing that there's a very clear connection.
Yeah, so that's really that's good to know. I'll tell you one thing that always freaked people out, and it doesn't work anymore because video games do not. Video games are so much more involved today
Yeah.
than they were. But it used to always freak people out because my whole part of my process that again nobody like anybody who's not ADHD is like, what the fuck is he doing? Bring a TV and playing video games while we're listening to mixes. But it would always freak people out because like I would be playing like playing Halo and just doing my thing and be like, oh, can we like adjust this? And like, hey, I got a lyric idea for that. Can I go do that? Video games were always that for me, and I did notice in the last like 7 or 8 years they've like advanced so far that it no longer does the thing that I need it to, and also like because I need to do something new and do something different, and then also like hyper fixate on that to get out of the writing space. I can't really go back to the old video games either because it's like I want to be doing like the next thing. I want to be doing the new like playing something new. So yeah, that is one thing that has been like kind of weirdly harmful to that process. It'd be really kind of cool to dig in on what that is anyway. But I used to do that all the time, and everybody would be like, I don't know why he like how he's listening and writing immediately out of that space, but I always did.
Um, Other types of arts, specifically, you mentioned poetry earlier. How much reading do you get to do, and does that play any role specifically on your songwriting?
I think everything I do plays a role in the songwriting. I barely read,
Oh,
um, and I would say I'm way more like creative and more apt to like sit down and write if I've been reading a lot. And that's just the nature of music. There's a reason I have two phones. You know what I mean? Like this one turns off, and you need to be able to escape that. I see like a lot of like I care so much for like family and community. Like the I feel for artists who get a lot of attention and can no longer like they got to do a bunch of things throughout the day because that's when I read, I like consume those books. Like I'm just like I'll read a book as quick as I can because I'm always so excited to get to the next thing and like I want to see where it's going and all of that stuff ends up coming out in some way. I'm like a really big believer in just like letting it all kind of sink in and become a part of like the next thing. I mean, dude, like I love. I grew up on like oldies radio and like AM radio, so it's a lot of like I mean early like blues and like Motown, and I love people playing the same fucking song with different lyrics. You know, I love that like there's some things I really like. I try to avoid thinking about too much today because of sample culture and like that's an interpolation and like whatever it is. We don't need that. Like I don't think you should think about that. I think there should always be like some sort of advancement, like some progression of the thing that made you want to write. We work in like in indigenous cultures. Like we have like a foundation around
Yeah.
indigenous visibility, and it is so inspiring that we get to hear so many songs, like thousands of years of song. It has a sound. There's the verse, there's the chorus, and you can kind of hear it in everything, whether it's drumming or powwow. It's this is the pattern, and then it changes up for a second, and this is the pattern. High voice, like I love hearing song and all of those things. Um, this is probably a tangent from where we started, but yeah, I like to let everything kind of like flow through. I like to be inspired by like whatever's in front of me, and it is just finding. You're just talking about kids for a second because I want to be that kid when I'm writing. Um, they're not all built for typical structure. And my favorite people to be in the studio with are those people who may not know how to play that instrument, but there's something like coming through that that feels inspired and feels like they're trying to find it and they're trying to stick it. It feels like skateboarding, honestly.
It reminds me of one of my favorite authors. I asked, his name is Anthony Doerr, and he wrote a book called All the Light We Cannot See. And I asked him about writer's block, and he goes, I don't believe in writer's block. I'll never forget this. He said, I call it he said, writer's block is a failure of courage. And
Wow.
isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I've always thought about like, yeah, just don't be afraid to create. Don't be afraid to write the bad stuff. That's what he says. Writer's block is because people say, I'm not going to write it unless it's perfect, but you can't do that as an artist.
But I would say like the ADHD thing in me is just allowing that itch to be scratched every second that it needs to be and not running from it because that's not the right way to do that.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, you can find all the episodes on all major streaming platforms and also at the Songwriters on Process website. That is at songwritersonpodcast.com. Pre-2020, this was not a pod. I was transcribing all of the interviews. So you can find all of them, hundreds of them, many hundreds of them on the Songwriters on Process website. You'll find both the transcribed interviews and the pod there. Take a deep dive, spend a day. These are great conversations with songwriters just about the writing process. Also, my book, Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, is out now worldwide on Hachette Books. You can find it online in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God, and it's his memoir. Again, that is called Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari. I am biased, but that's a damn good book. My email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love suggestions, questions, comments. People always email me and tell me who they want to see on the pod next. You never know. Send me an email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. That's it for me, everyone. Have a great day.